You know, for a game that was supposedly going to be the end of a company, Final Fantasy sure has a lot of sequels under its belt. Hell, I don't even know what we're up to anymore. 13? 14? 285? Anyway, for my 50th review, it's Final Fantasy VI, or if you prefer, 3. I'm going by the chronological name, as there's a 3 that came out in the Japanese Famicom, so 6 it is. It's the first Final Fantasy game I've ever played, thanks to one of my good friends, and I beat it within a few weeks. And damn was this a fine game! I've been planning on doing this game as my 50th review ever since I couldn't get it done in time for my 10th review. But honestly, I'm glad I waited. I know I start off most of my reviews with the title screen, but this game has one of the most epic intro scenes in the game. The storm that you see right in the beginning is shown just when you turn the game on. The scene that's playing now actually plays out after you go through a starting scene starring Terra, the main character, and 2 guards that have her mind controlled. You sicko, they're doing it for a war mission. Get your mind out of the gutter. This is cool because they're walking in a vast snowfield towards Narshe. Basically, they found an Esper, or what's considered a magical being trapped in a crystal. These Espers grant immense magical power, and later on in the game, they teach you magic. Of course, Narshe isn't willing just to hand over the Esper, so you have to fight your way through the town, utilizing mechanical transports known as Magitech armor. You get the ability a few times in the game to utilize them, but don't get spoiled. For the most part, you'll be doing a lot of regular walking. I mentioned Terra's the main character, so let me explain why. She's half Esper. In a nutshell, a human woman somehow ends up sucked into the world of Espers. They try to kick her out, but one Esper named Bannon falls in love with her and convinces her to stay in their world. She gets knocked up and gives birth to Terra. Fast forward about a year, and the Emperor of the world, Gestahl, he finds the Esper world to try to gain their power. Terra and her mother are forced back into the mortal world, and Gestahl takes Terra to raise as a soldier. Throughout the game, Terra freaks out a few times until she realizes who she is and how she can effectively harness her powers. She's also only one of 2 characters who can learn magic just by leveling up, although this system is pretty sporadic and you don't learn too much. So why is she the main character? Well, for one, she's trying to find out exactly who she is. Once she does, she starts wondering if anyone can love her for what she is. I know, it's sappy, but the game does a great job in showing how depressed she is. In fact, in the second half of the game, when she does find out who cares about her, she initially refuses to fight and would rather stay with them. Of course, her mind gets changed when she realizes fighting with your group is a better alternative to always living in fear of another attack. Terra's theme is pretty much what you hear when you're on the world map in the first half of the game, and it's incredibly dramatic and moody. In the second half, it gets replaced by something even darker, but it's necessary, and I'll get on to more about that later. But Terra's not your only fighter, as this is an RPG and you need parties, right? Including Terra, there's 14 playable characters in the game. That's right, 14. 2 of them are hidden, and both have vastly different styles, but they each have their uses. Let me go down the roster rundown. I already mentioned Terra, so let's move on to your second character, Locke. He's a thief, treasure hunter, who has a steal ability. In case you've never played a Final Fantasy game, this ability lets you take items from enemies. It's usually not very successful, but you can get rare items this way. Truth be told, he's still my favorite character in the game. He can equip a lot of stuff in the game, and he's always trying to save the female characters because of his dramatic past event, where his fiancée was killed trying to save him from falling from his doom. Locke never lets that go, and it haunts him to this day, and it's evident throughout the entire game. His main goal is to find the Phoenix Magicite, which is rumored to bring back the dead. He does eventually find it, and it's a pretty depressing scene. Next up is Edgar, the king of the kingdom of Figaro. He's a fair ruler and also a ladies' man, as he's always hitting on the girls. In fact, the first time you meet him, he sizes up Terra. The cool thing is that his castle can submerge and move underground, hiding it from any attacking forces. His battle ability is called Tools, which is an array of 8 utilities designed to mainly incapacitate enemies in various ways. The auto crossbow does moderate damage to all enemies, flash damages all enemies and also blinds them, lowering the hit rates. Drill does damage and ignores any defensive stat. Chainsaw is a 2-part skill, whether it either does heavy damage or attempts to outright one-hit kill an enemy. There's more, but I'm not going to go and explain each one. Edgar also is one of the few people who can equip spears, but with his tool selection, it's probably rare that you'll ever do a normal attack with him. The next person you join up with is Sabin, who, coincidentally, is Edgar's twin brother. They decide who would take the throne with a flip of a coin. Later on, you actually learn that Sabin rigged it with a 2-headed coin, so that he would purposely lose, as he knew Edgar would make a better leader. Sabin's a martial artist to the group, and he possesses amazing strength. His special ability comes in the form of what's called blitzes. These range anywhere from single enemy punch fests to throwing waves of air at all of your foes. He even gets a decent healing spell that splits up his own HP among your party. Or, if you need something a little bit more drastic, a blitz that sacrifices him but completely restores your party. Don't worry, you can always revive him after the battle's over. These blitzes are performed by pressing certain buttered combinations, not unlike most fighting games out there. Screw it up, and the blitz fails and Sabin nullifies his turn in battle. Just like Edgar, Sabin's regular attacks are pretty much outclassed by these blitzes, especially once he learns Bum Rush, an attack that consistently deals close to 5,000 damage points. However, if you did want to attack with Sabin, he utilizes claws. Now, the next person you meet is technically Bannon, but he doesn't really stick around your party long enough to really be considered a character. My definition of the 14 characters are 14 guys who you can take to the final tower. Bannon is playable for a short time, and he's just the leader of the Returners, an anti-Empire group that's trying to overthrow the tyrannical rule. Bannon's only useful for his health skill, which restores a considerable amount of health to the party. Again, he's not around for long, so I don't consider him one of the 14. The reason why I'm bringing this up, though, is because you have a branch in the path, where you can choose one of 3 scenarios. Locke goes to South Figaro to distract the Empire's army so that the Returners can get away from their hideout. Sabin was ejected off a raft when fighting an evil octopus, so he needs to find his way back to the main party. And Terra, Edgar, and Bannon need to head back to Narsh. This is the easiest scenario, and you don't meet anyone new. If you choose Locke's scenario, you'll meet up with Celeste, who is the other person who learns magic freely without espers. She was injected with magical abilities when she was young and raised by the Empire. She's technically a general, but defects due to Gestalt and Kefka's treacherous plans to use Magicite to build an unstoppable, magical army. Locke saves her because Celeste reminds him of his past love, although he doesn't come out and admit it off the bat. Celeste's ability is called Runic, which allows her to absorb any spells cast without taking any damage, but only as long as she has a sword equipped. In absorbing the skill, she gains however many magic points it takes to cast it. Of course, not all spells are runicable, like Meteor and Ultima. She didn't equip the majority of the weapons and armor in the game. Now we move on to Sabin's scenario for the next few characters you meet. Sabin ends up meeting with Shadow, an assassin for hire. He travels with his dog Interceptor, who will randomly counterattack enemies with some pretty devastating attacks. Shadow is a ninja of the game, and can throw surplus weapons at your enemies for some pretty decent damage. Other than that, Shadow really isn't the best character in the game, as his weapons are typically a bit on the weaker side, although several of them do have the chance to instantly dispatch an enemy. This can be a pain when fighting the undead though, as instant kills just respawn them immediately. Shadow's theme, on the other hand, it's freaking awesome. It just has the quality of the unknown working for it. There's a dark past to Shadow as well that he's desperately trying to hide, but at the end of the game, he gives up trying to hide it and just comes to terms with it. Also, Shadow is one of the few characters you can permanently lose. When you're on the floating island and heading for the airship to escape, there's a timer. Get to the airship, but don't jump on. When there's about 5 seconds left, the timer will just disappear and Shadow will join you. Don't do this, and he dies, and you won't be able to use him again. Also, in the first half of the game, Shadow may join your party, but also leaves as he pleases. It's not until the second half of the game where he becomes a permanent fixture in your group. Cyan is next, and he's a soldier from the domain of Doma. The castle is poisoned by Kefka, and Cyan's pure intent of revenge is what motivates him to go after Kefka. And before I move on, Kefka is the primary villain of the game. I'll get to him a little bit later though. But for now, back to Cyan. He has a fear of machines, and a few times when he has to deal with them, it usually ends pretty comically. Cyan's amazing in battle, and he can equip some special swords that do some really heavy damage. He also has a sword tech ability, which is a list of 8 skills that do damage. This takes place with a meter that is numbered from 1 to 8. In order to perform a skill, you let the meter rise to the number of the skill you want to use, then press A to use it. This takes some time, so it's a good idea to have your other party members attack first, then use the sword tech. Another odd note with Cyan is that he typically speaks in an Old English dialogue, so expect to see a lot of thous in there. Your next friend is Gao, and he's an interesting character with an interesting family. Basically, his father is delirious, and when Gao was born, his father thought he was a monster and threw him onto the Veldt, which is a large barren plain where monsters migrate to, for some odd reason that's never really explained. Gao, as such, has a wild upbringing, but he does have good intentions when you meet him, and feed him some dried meat. One funny exchange later, Gao joins your party. He's one of the characters in the game you'll either love or you'll hate. He can't attack directly, but can mimic any monster abilities he's learned. Basically, he has 2 special commands, Rage and Leap. If you're on the Veldt with him, you can have him leap to jump onto a monster, and the battle will just end. A few fights later, he'll return you with the monster in the rage list. When choosing rage from the menu, Gao gains any inherited abilities from the creature you choose, such as flying or steadily losing HP due to being an undead spirit. His attack will mimic this rage, and each rage has one skill taken directly from the monster that Gao will randomly use. Some rages are infinitely more useful than others, so it's one of those things where it's best to practice and experiment with them if you plan on using him. When used right, he can be one of the most dangerous characters in the game. Also, it is impossible to achieve all 255 rages, as there's only 252 available without cheats, due to some programming issues and bugs. I'm not going to go on about that, as there's entire walkthroughs on the internet explaining the mechanics of what and why those rage are. The next guy is one of my favorites. He is the gambler named Setzer, and he's the one that owns the airship that you require to infiltrate the Empire's Esper prison, otherwise known as the Magitech Research Facility. He attacks with darts, cards, and dice. Yeah, darts I can see, but those cards must have sharpened edges, similar to Kung Lao's had in Mortal Kombat. The dice can be one of the best weapons in the game. Okay, not the regular dice, but if you enter Kefka's tower early on and procure the fixed dice, holy shit, the game gets easy. Setzer has a chance of dealing 9,999 damage frequently, and if you can equip him with a relic called the Offering, which has a player attack 4 times in a row, that's a possible 40,000 damage in one turn. Now, the actual chances of doing that are slim, but still, it's a huge amount of damage to do to your enemies. It's because of this reason that I put Setzer in my party the majority of the game. If you don't want him to attack, you can also gamble a bit with his slot ability, which works just like a slot machine. If you don't match anything, you get a Lagomorph, which heals a small portion of damage, but more importantly, cures any status ailments like poisoning. The most common winning combination is 3 gems, but you can also get 3 bars, which summons a random Esper, or 3 sevens, which I've never actually done. Also, if you get 2 sevens and a Joker, it's game over. No, I'm serious here. It kills everything on the screen, including your party. Setzer can also equip a relic that switches his ability to coin toss, which allows you to throw a portion of your coins at your enemies. It does decent damage, but make sure you're not saving up for anything first. Next up is Mog, who is a Moogle. That's right, you actually get to play as a Moogle in this game, and in my opinion, he has the absolute best theme song in this game. He's very rambunctious and attacks with a spear. If you remember to the beginning of the game, you get slight control over him in an opening segment where Locke enlists the Moogle's help to protect Terra. He's the other character to attack with a spear, and his special is to dance. He learns dances just by fighting in different environments, and some dances are good, and others not so much. When you dance, you lose control of Mog, but he uses various skills from that environment. These range from non-elemental damage, physical hits, and even full party cure skills. It can be helpful if you're into that kind of fighting style. Me, I like having full control over my party's movements. Mog can also equip the Moogle Charm, a relic that completely eliminates any random enemy encounters. It can be very helpful if you're stuck somewhere, but I still prefer fighting at the XP and magic points. You then will meet up with Strago, a blue mage that learns enemy spells. He's a descendant of the older race of magicians, and his entire town prefers to keep their magic powers on the down low. Some of his blue magic spells are kick-ass, but most require a large amount of MP to cast. Once he learns Osmos, this isn't a problem, but I tend to find Celeste and Terra are the better spellcasters. You don't really get a ton of info in Strago's backstory, which is kind of odd. You meet Realm a short time later. She's considered Strago's granddaughter, and she's a foul-mouthed kid who likes to draw. In fact, that's actually her ability. She draws her enemy to project one of their skills back at them. If you give her the fake mustache relic, you choose what skill to use when she draws. There's one simple reason why I don't use Realm though. Her sketch ability is incredibly glitchy. In fact, if you're unlucky enough, she can use sketch, and the game will just glitch out and crash. Seriously, it's annoying and it seems to happen randomly. Because of this, when I do use Realm, I tend to give her white magic and have her be my dedicated healer of the group. Now, let's move on to the 2 hidden characters. Then I'll move on to a different topic. Umaru is a Yeti. Yep, he's the abominable snowman of the game, and he's also the Berserker class. In order to obtain him, you need to get Mog and then fight the Esper Tritok, which is the Esper in the back of the Narsh that originally reminds Terra of her magic nature. A hidden path will open, and you'll need to navigate this dungeon with Mog. The boss here is Umaru, so you'll need to defeat him. Mog will yell at Umaru to join up, and he does. Umaru cannot be equipped with anything but a relic, but if you find a bone club, he'll automatically use it. He's pretty much in full-out Berserk mode at all times, and you never really get control of him. Unfortunately, I never really used him, but he can be a formidable opponent if you need a powerhouse in your party. The other hidden character is a bit more difficult to find. His, or her, or its name is Gogo, and when you do meet up with him and or her, you get a funny little bit about them. Gogo is a mimic, and as such can repeat any previous command of the person directly before him. You can also completely customize all 3 of his other battle slots. Want him to have Blitz, Slon, Runic? Fine. Tools, Sword Tech, Rage? Sure, why not? The possibilities are pretty much endless, making him an instant classic. His equipment loadouts are a bit restricted, but most of the time you won't really be using him for physical attacks. If you give him the magic skill, he'll automatically know every skill that your current party knows. But why use magic when you can just cast it for free with Mimic? Have someone double cast Ultimate and have Gogo mimic it, and the enemy won't stand too much of a chance. Okay, so now you've been fully exposed to the entire cast of the good side, so let's move on to the villains of the game. I've already explained who Gestalt is, and how he wants the magic site charged to give him magical power. Kefka, on the other hand, is one of Gestalt's flunkies who prefers not to follow orders. Kefka has a complete disregard for human life, and has no problem sacrificing his own squad for his own victories. He ends up killing Gestalt so he can fully harness the power of Goss's statues, a bunch of super magical beings that are the entire focus point for magic. After killing Gestalt, Kefka misaligns the statues, causing the entire world to go through massive transformations, but at the same time, he obtains the immense power from the statues, essentially making him an evil overlord. In the second half of the game, aptly named the World of Ruin, Kefka enjoys torching random towns with his Light of Judgment. Kefka's evil intentions aren't the only thing that make him an awesome character, though. He also has some pretty kick-ass dialogue. One of my favorite lines is at the end of the game, right before the final battle. Kefka is throwing down threats left and right and asking why everyone wants to rebuild things when they know they're just going to be destroyed again. All of the party members explain their intentions and what they found out on their journey, which is one of those relatively feel-good moments. Kefka then just pouts and tells them to be quiet because they sound like pages from a self-help booklet. That's freaking awesome. That's just hilarious. Kefka just has the personality that just makes him a liked villain, and there's a ton of discussions on the internet on who is the more lovable villain, Kefka or Sephiroth. I'm not taking any sides here, but I still love Kefka's humorous dialogues. The first time you meet him is when he's walking up to Castle Figaro, which is located in a vast desert. He notices his boots have sand on them and orders his escorts to brush them off. It's just simple stuff like that which gives you the thoughts that Kefka is just that cruel and uncaring. But not everyone from the Empire is evil. You do get a glimpse into one of Gestalt's kinder generals, named Leo. You actually play with him in exactly one battle, in which he's tasked to kill Kefka before he gets too far. Of course, this just doesn't end too well. What also makes the characters believable is their backstories. Everyone has a tale to tell, and when you start getting the chance to tie up loose ends with the side quests, it's just when you learn how everyone's stories have caught up with them. Basically, the second half of the game is all about Celeste reuniting with her scattered teammates, and then going to destroy Kefka once and for all. You start by finding Savin, and then Edgar, who's masked as a criminal so he can sneak into his castle through the prison. He does this only because the thugs he's with, they know the passage through it, and he doesn't in this new world. After this, you then set out to find Setzer, and then obtain a new airship belonging to a friend of his that passed away. After uncovering it, you have open reign on where you want to go next. Do you go right for Kefka with your existing 4 people? Here's a little hint, it's not recommended. You can go easy to the demolished city of Mobilis to meet up with Terra. Or would you go to Narsh to meet back up with Mog? The choices are yours and yours alone. There's plenty of things to do, and each one has different rewards. Let's move on to the battle mechanics. If you've ever played any Final Fantasy game, this won't be anything out of the ordinary. By default, the game uses the active setting, which means that your enemies won't wait for you to make a move. You can change this if you prefer to be a bit more methodical in your tactics. Basically, each character has a meter that signifies how ready they are to attack. Once it fills, a menu will pop up asking how you want them to attack. You can choose to fight, which is your basic attack. You can use your character's ability as long as it's available. Some characters have skills based strictly on what weapon type you're using, so it may be grayed out. For example, if you have Celeste equipped with a mace, she won't be able to use her runic, since it requires the sword to be wielded. If you progressed far enough in the game, you'll have the magic option. This is also the command you use when you want to summon an Esper to battle. Finally, when you have the item selection, if you press the D-pad to the left, a row option becomes available, which allows your character to change rows. The front row wields more damage, but also forces you to take harder hits. If you're in the back row, you'll do less damage but also take less. There's exceptions to this, but the game tells you that. Finally, pressing the pad to the right gives you the defend option, which, although it's hardly ever necessary, preps your character to take a heavy hit and cuts down damage. If you press L and R at the same time and hold them down, your party will attempt to run. As long as one player escapes, the game will continue, no matter if the rest of the party is wiped out. Now, if you do get game over, all is not lost. Unlike most other RPGs I've played, Final Fantasy VI has a unique feature that if you die, you will still go back to the last place you saved the game. However, any experience points you've accumulated stay with you, allowing your team to power up a bit with each failure. Any items found or magic learned will have to be reacquired, but it's a small price to pay. Considering you keep your XP level, I'd consider it a fair trade-off. I've mentioned that you can summon espers, so let me explain how the magic system works. Basically, once you get to a point where Terra is passed out from expending all of her energy being an esper, one of them confronts you and converts himself to Magicite. This Magicite is the remains of a dead esper and contains its powers. In an analogy, think of the Magicite to the espers like an urn to a cremated human. When these espers are equipped, they begin to allow your characters to learn magical spells. Some spells are taught by multiple espers, but each will have a different learning speed, which is shown on the menu. By fighting battles with espers equipped, you'll obtain magic points. These magic points are multiplied by the spell's magnifier, and once you get 100 points, you learn a spell for that character. Each character has to learn their own set of spells, but anyone can learn anything. You're confused, aren't you? Alright, let me give you an example. Ifrit teaches Fire 2 at a 5% rate. Say you fight a battle with Locke and Celeste. Neither know Fire 2. Locke is equipped with Ifrit's Magicite. Once the battle is run, you gain 3 magic points. In this case, Locke obtains 15 points towards Fire 2. Once Fire 2 reaches 100 points, he learns it and can freely cast it. Celeste, on the other hand, isn't learning Fire 2 because it's not equipped on her. Got it now? You can freely switch espers at will. Also, each one can be summoned once per battle. Some are useful, and some really aren't. They usually carry a heavy cost to your MP though, so unless you have a way of replenishing your MP, it's wise not to go nuts casting your esper summons. Finally, there's one extra reason to have espers equipped, even if you have a character that has learned every spell to be learned. Every esper carries with it a level up bonus. For example, one may give you an extra point in strength if you have it equipped when you level up. It makes for an even more customizable team. Let's move on to the graphics, shall we? For a Super Nintendo game, they're simply phenomenal. There's only a handful of games that might take the crown for the best of the console, but I think this game comes close. The visuals are just plain impressive. Everything from the opening Mode 7 walk to Narsh to the Barren Falls just shows incredible detail. Another thing that I loved about this game over the others is that, unlike the previous entries, your character sprites are identical in battle and on the field. The previous games used smaller characters on the field, and now that I think of it, also looked more cartoonish. Whereas Final Fantasy VI goes for a more gritty steampunk feel. Take, for example, the Haunted Woods. Generic name, but damn it looks creepy, and for a good reason. After the Haunted Woods comes the Doom Train, which carries departed souls to the afterlife. This plays heavily in the game's plot, since Cyan's family was just murdered a few minutes ago by Kefka. Also, much like Zelda Link to the Past, the World of Balance and the World of Ruin both have distinct feels to them. The World of Balance is much more lighthearted and laid back, whereas the World of Ruin is much darker and has a feeling of desperation all over it. There's a lot of dungeons that look the part too. Some just look sort of plain, but others take on a complete scene with debris scattered all over. The Ancient Castle, for example, shows debris and scattered rocks all over the field, and has a story all in itself about a queen that cried over an esper's death. Many of the dungeons just have their own stories to tell, and add into the game as a whole, but the graphical detail just helps add to the descriptions of these stories. Now, not everything looks amazing. Some of the spell effects are a mixed bag. Some spells like Ice 3, Ultima, or Iron Star look impressive. Others, like Murden, look they were skimped down on a bit. Enemies have the same feel and easily look like there were many different artists taking on different sets of creatures. This doesn't detriment from the game too much though, as it's hardly noticeable unless you really glance at it. Let's move on to the sound now, and it's another part of the game that just plain shines. I hate to keep going back to it, but the beginning intro shows a very slow, dramatic, moody theme that plays perfectly in time to the game's opening. It's also perfect for the world map. When you're on the Veldt, it's a tribal theme. Once again, it matches Gao's personality perfectly, since he's a child that's attempting to survive on his own by living with monsters. The battle theme is great to listen to, and at one point I actually had it as my ringtone on my cell phone. Yeah, I know, I'm a geek. Now, take a listen to this. This is a humorous song that plays when the game starts going for a lighthearted scene, usually involving someone getting embarrassed in one way or another. This is one of my favorite songs, and when I'm dealing with the stupid person, typically at work, this plays in the back of my head. I'm serious on that too, and it's occasionally hard not to laugh, but I got good at it. Finally, let's move on to the final scene, which wraps up my feelings on the story, graphics, and even sound. They all blend in perfectly. Basically, in order to stop Kefka, you need to destroy the 3 magical statues that are giving Kefka his powers. These statues are reportedly immortal, but soon you find that that's not the case. If you're leveled up enough and have the right party, you shouldn't have too many issues with these. This is how the final bosses are laid out. After Kefka's taunts, you take whatever 12 people you brought into Kefka's tower and order them. Before we continue, you read that right. 12 characters. The maximum amount of players in this game is 14, but for the final dungeon, you need to split up into 3 parties, with a max of 4 people in each party. So that makes 12. There's 2 that need to stay on the airship. Anyway, let's get back on track. You line up all 12 in order, which basically becomes a batting order. The first 4 people you choose are your starters and begin the final boss battle. If you lose one due to death, stoning, or some other loss, you can resurrect them until the battle is over. If the battle is won but a character is dead, they are replaced by the next one on the list. But if a character dies but is revived in time, they continue on. All bets are off if all 4 players die. It's then an immediate game over like normal. So you go through all 3 statues and finally get to Kefka. Hot damn, I love this music. The battle background's amazing, and even Kefka looks purely insane. Of course, he throws out a quick monologue and starts his evil laugh. I love how he's portrayed as a wannabe god. As for fighting him, he isn't kidding around anymore, and he hits hard. He has 3 attacks that really do a ton of damage. He has a skill called Fallen One, which is freaking annoying as hell. He calls down 4 angels to your entire party, and they wipe all your characters down to a single health point. If you don't cure this quickly, you're screwed. He also uses Havoc Wing, which deals intense damage to one player. Then he has Goner, which looks like an anime-inspired move that does some pretty decent damage. The other attack to look out for is simply called Train, and it does random status ailments to the entire party. Blind, mute, poison, you name it. The battle as a whole just pumps the adrenaline through you, but with a strong party, or fixed dice and offering, it's really not too hard. Finally killing Kefka will make you breathe a sigh of relief. You can then sit back and watch the long ending, but you deserved it. Because this game is so freaking awesome, I'm not going to spoil it, but instead say that it shows all the characters escaping Kefka's tower in separate scenes that portray their personalities. The length of the game varies depending on how much time you plan on putting into it. If you stick strictly to the story and don't do anything extra, expect about a 20-hour trek. However, for people like me who enjoy completion, expect about double that. I've played the game numerous times and know exactly where I was going, so it took me about 28 hours to complete the game with everything except all the rages and lures. However, considering the amount of time I normally use Scout and Strago, that wasn't a huge deal to me. Luck and Setzer were the only ones who knew every spell in the game, but again, it's not something that's really required. For someone going on their first playthrough and wanting everything complete, expect around a 40-hour journey. Okay, I've gone on ranting and praising this game for long enough. It's time to pull this to a conclusion. I really have nothing bad to say about this game. To me, it's nearly flawless. If I had to nitpick and have my way, I'd have an option to save equipment loadouts so I didn't have to manually change Setzer's fixed dice as a weapon every time. The game considers it to be a low-powered weapon since it's based on luck, so pressing the optimum equipment option doesn't put that in consideration. Again, that's just scraping the bottom of the barrel with flaws, but it's more of an opinion. If you're a console RPG fan at all, you really need to play this game. It will suck you in and not let go until Kefka has bit the dust. It's easily top 3 material on my all-time favorite games, and it's easily my favorite RPG of all time. If you can play it and hate it, feel free to blame me on whatever time you lost playing it. I got broad shoulders, and for this game, I'm pretty sure I can pretty much handle it. Although it's probably painfully obvious, the score of this game, it's a 10 out of 10. This is Reaper. Happy fragging. Oh, and before I actually close this out, this is my 50th review, so that means I got 50 done. Yeah, no, it's pretty obvious. But if you have a game you want me to review, send me a PM. I'm always looking for ideas, so we'll see what happens.